G'day and welcome back to the Talking Leadership TV podcast series. Thank you for joining us again. Our guest today is Corine Roesner. Corine brings 10 years of experience working in both the corporate and wellness arenas, as well as starting 3 of her own businesses, allowing her to understand the huge importance of having the right mindset for success. She is known for her gentle yet effective approach to getting her clients achieving what they thought was initially impossible. Like you, she understands the importance for ambitious people to feel clear, confident, and in control of where they're heading, so it's no surprise that these values are at the forefront of the work that she does. As a master neuro-linguistic programmer and influential high-peak performance mind coach, she combines these techniques to get impressive results for her clients who engage her services. I enjoyed today's podcast, which was split into 2 sessions. The first looking at developing entrepreneurs and the second challenges to entrepreneurial development, which were recorded over a 2-day period. But as always, enough from me. I'll hand over to Corine. G'day, Corine. Thank you for joining me for the podcast, mate. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Look, we agreed to do a couple of things with our series of podcasts, and the exciting bit for me is to have a 2-part conversation with you. So we're looking at developing entrepreneurs and challenges facing entrepreneurs, and we agreed offline that we're going to have the discussion around developing them first and challenges second. So in that vein, and before we get into the questions proper, why work with entrepreneurs? I'm interested in that part of this conversation. So I'm going a little bit off script. So give us some sense of why you work with these strange and wonderful and weird human beings, mate.
I think that's one of the reasons is I love working with ambitious people, because ambitious people are the ones that go out there and make stuff happen. And entrepreneurs are the ones that, come up with some incredible ideas. And if they've got the right tools, they can make those things happen. And it's just helping, I guess where I come in is helping them develop those tools so that no matter what life throws at them, they can continue to create what it is that they want to create. So I'd say, yeah, that's like my main focus there. And I've also, in the past started my own businesses and gone down that road. And I've seen the importance of a few things that you need if you're going to make those things successful. So I guess I've lived that experience, and now I'm like, okay, well, I want those people to succeed, and how can I help them?
Excellent start. So help me understand why developing entrepreneurs and I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong here, entrepreneurial capability, why that's important and or why it's not important. I think I know which way you'll go on this one, but give me the why here.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I definitely think it's important. There's a lot of factors. It's not just having a great idea and going and making it happen, right? Yes, that is, you need the idea and then you want to go and make that happen. But there's a lot of parts to success that need to come into place so that you actually get to the end point, and you make that a thing. And whether, it's entrepreneurs that have gone from corporate to starting their own thing, or they've come straight out of school, or they've tried and not succeeded over and over, there's ways to develop them that no matter where they've come from, they can still grow whatever it is that they want. And so I always say to people that there's 6 parts to success. And if you can, and these are resources, and if you can draw on those at any point in time, whatever you need in that moment, you're going to be able to build that resilience and adaptability and continue on. And that's having motivation, that's having passion, discipline, inspiration, will, and focus. So if those are the 6 resources that you have, and say you're having a really hard day and you're lacking that motivation, you can tune into that inspiration, and then you're going to get that motivation again, right? So there's a lot of tools in your toolbox, resources within you that you can call on to get you out of wherever you're at, to shift you back onto that track. Does that make sense?
Intuitively, it does. Let me ask another question. I think a logical follow-up here, and this is definitely around the trainability, the development of entrepreneurs, if you can call it that, there is a school of thought that, well, two schools of thought. You can train and develop entrepreneurs, or it's not possible to train and develop entrepreneurs. What's your view on the argument that it's difficult or not possible to train entrepreneurs?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I've seen the other side of it, right? Like I've seen people go from someone who, hasn't thought they were an entrepreneur but has this great idea to then go and creating success from that. So I've seen that progression. I'm someone who truly believes that we have all the resources that we need within us, or we can unlock what we need to make things happen. So if we are, there's a few different things like resilience, adaptability, having the right mindset, focus, motivation, because I'm assuming like, the other side of things that you're talking about, those people are the ones that are in that more structured workplace, who know their daily tasks. Is that kind of the other side?
Yes and no. So the argument, and for the life of me, I can't remember the guest that put this proposal up, and I'll put it in the pod description. But there's an argument that the inherent, almost DNA nature of um, the entrepreneur, that he or she can't be you can't be taught the entrepreneurial skill sets to become an entrepreneur. And I'm assuming here that, and well, I'm not assuming, you've just said that you believe that that's not the case. My view of this is, I think there's some legitimacy in both sides of that argument, and I'm not saying one is necessarily right and one is necessarily wrong, in that I think there's a fine line. And again, love your commentary here, that entrepreneurial entrepreneurialism versus being an entrepreneur, I think, are two different things, because you could have a CEO that works for any corporate or any not-for-profit, demonstrate entrepreneurial thinking and get out and develop an idea within the business, and suddenly there's a new product offering, or there's a new service. Okay, you could argue that that might be the point, but in of itself, they are not entrepreneurs, because it's not their business. It's not an idea that is addressing a market, an issue or a gap in a particular market. And um, I think for me, this is an area of interest, in that on both sides, there's legitimacy in asking these questions, because if we're going to spend our own money, or we're going to spend potentially public money on creating ecosystems and linking up people that are playing in the entrepreneurial space, we have to be prepared to wear failure. That's part of the process, and I've had enough conversations. I think you'll agree. If you don't, please tell me. If you don't, that there are probably more failures than successes, and hopefully the success that you get outstrips the failures. And this is, and don't get me wrong here, this is if the specific entrepreneur is motivated by a profit motive, or if they're motivated by uh, a community set of goals. And that social entrepreneur is very different to the non-social entrepreneur. And I know there are subsets there. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really beautiful definition before that. There are entrepreneurs, yes, within companies, and then there is with the mindset, and then there's, the other side of it, those ones that go out and create their businesses. So that's a beautiful definition there. My mindset around it is that when you're going out and you're going to, if you can get really clear on what your values are, let's start with that, right? If you can get clear on what your values are. So yes, some people are motivated by money, and some people are motivated by, helping people or whatever it is. If we can get clear on what those values are, that's when we're going to be more motivated, more inspired, and more focused, because we know, hey, if we're meeting these values, then everything else feels in flow and at ease, right? It's when we're going against our values that is where we hit these curveballs and we face these challenges that almost feel too hard to get through. So I always tell people to write your top 6 values, get really specific on what they look like, so that when you're, going out and building your business, those really hard days, you know why you're doing it in the end, whether that's a financial goal or a helping people goal or a freedom goal, whatever it is, you know why you're doing it. And so, a big part of developing entrepreneurs is getting really clear on that, because until we have them written down and we can visually see them on a piece of paper or on our phone, we're not going to be truly, truly tuned into that. And I've, seen over and over, as soon as people understand what those are to a T, then they're like, okay, I can go and do that. Does that make sense?
100%. The why is an issue not just for entrepreneurs but leaders in their own right. Is if you don't understand that, and I think extending that conversation around the why is, what is the value set that underpins the why for people in leadership positions or entrepreneurs? And I think if you've got clarity on that, it makes the road a little bit easier. There's still the doing of getting some stuff done, and I don't think that if there are challenges to be met, they're going to come up at some point. And I use the term, and it's not my term, so I'm not making any claims on this. That leader or entrepreneur toolkit is quite important to deal with those things. And I would suggest, just intuitively, that some people have a very refined toolkit and others don't know what the hell that toolkit looks like, or need some help identifying of the various skill sets they've got, what is going to be appropriate or fit for purpose for a particular challenge. And I guess that's the space that you play in with entrepreneurs, yes?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, there's a statistic going around where it's success is 80% your inner resources and mindset, and 20% the actual actions that you take from that aligned place. And so, when we talk about developing entrepreneurs, it's developing that resilience and adaptability and objectiveness and that forward thinking, with all the other mindset stuff that they need to work through, because challenges, as you would know, are inevitable. It's how we move through them and how we learn to learn from them that gets us to the other side. And so many times on the other side, there's so much growth, right? It's learning to push through the fear, the challenges, whatever it is that comes at us, with a very growth orientated mindset. And so when we're working with entrepreneurs, a big part of it is that mindset, because no matter what they've come from, whether they've, like I said before, had the failures, or they've come from corporate, or they've, built businesses that have done great, but now they're on to the next thing, it's still making sure that everything is aligned within them and that they have that wholehearted direction, focus, and that momentum that continues.
Makes sense. I think one thing that I've noted amongst the entrepreneurs that I've had the good fortune to be able to speak to, and leaders in their own right, is a need to just accept that failure is coming. Learn to embrace it, love it. It's going to happen whether you're prepared for it or not. It's what you do with it after that I think delineates the better leaders, the more effective leaders versus entrepreneurs. And I guess amongst entrepreneurs, learning from missteps and outright failures is a critical part of that experiential learning that you have to go through when you're going through the things that you've been talking about. So, can I ask the following? And this is, we can get as granular as this on this as you like, but the Multiplier Mindset blog noted the following: what are the challenges of entrepreneurship? And they looked at 6 different areas. And for the purposes of this conversation, if you'll allow me, can we talk about developing good habits and achieving goals? So this was one of the 6, and that one was interesting to me because habits take a while to inculcate in particular individuals, and then linking that to achieving goals. Now, yeah, I can see the connection, but there are so many other variables that can stop you reaching a goal that no amount of developing good habits is going to stop a potential challenge. Let's say somebody has said to you, all right, Corinne, I've got $1 million that I want to invest in the business. Everything's good to go. Then the day before the launch of a particular product or service, the money gets pulled. No amount of you having good habits is going to stop that from happening. But in that link, what's your observation around that particular link?
Yeah, I guess developing good habits, like you said, it can take a while. And with some things, it's harder, right, than others. But if it's all about reframing and working out ways that we work best. So I always look at habits similar to routines, right? We want to implement the right routines, the right habits that are going to have us on that path to achieving our goals. So it's learning, okay, that version of me that has achieved everything that I want to achieve and beyond, how do they act? How do they go through their days? All of that. So it's really getting clear on that. And you'll hear me talk about clarity all the time, because if we can be as clear about every area of our life as we can, we're going to be very clear on what we need to do each day, each week, each month to get us on that direction. And so I guess when it comes to developing good habits, a lot of it is, and because I work a lot with the mindset, it's learning how to change that internal talk so that it's working for us. So for example, if we wanted to, this is a terrible example, but eat more vegetables, okay? We'll make it nice and simple. Instead of saying, I'm going to eat more vegetables today, by saying, I will eat more vegetables today, it's almost like we're adding that extra layer of accountability. And so it's the same in business, right? I'm going to get that pitch deck finished today. I will get that pitch deck finished today. By starting to shift our language, we're going to be starting to internally holding ourselves accountable. Now, obviously, and this is, with routines and habits, everyone is different. So what might work for one person isn't going to work for another. And so a big part of becoming and developing entrepreneurs is learning what's going to work for you, and also being able to innovate and adjust things as needed. So when we're talking about, building good habits, it's what does that future version of me do to be the best version of them in that moment to achieve those goals? Okay, I'm going to start acting like that now, and being really clear on it, really visualizing it internally, and then achieving those goals, heading towards those goals. A big part of as well getting to those goals is acting with intention, right? When we act with intention throughout our day, whether we we sit down and say, okay, I've got an hour to write this out, or I've got my to-do list that needs to be finished by this time. If we have that intention behind our day, behind what we do and how we, the habits that we have, that's going to really help us get onto that path of success towards our goals.
Can't can't argue with you on that one. I guess it's the degree to which you're going to stick to that and create your routines, habits that are going to be as productive for you as they can be. The other area that was brought up in that in the blog post was around teamwork and delegation. Now, that one was interesting for me because not all entrepreneurs, and I draw on my experience talking to a subset of entrepreneurs. I haven't spoken to every entrepreneur on the planet, so this is a view that I have that yes, teamwork is critical for success unless you're a solo operation and there's no one else in the business. And delegation's an important part of that. But in a scenario where an entrepreneur has a team, there he or she may not have the managerial or leadership skills to understand what good delegation and teamwork skill sets are, but can find others to do that for them. So, as someone who works with entrepreneurs, is your bent towards find the right people and get them in to do the things that you need to do at that operational level, or learn to do it yourself, or some hybrid of that?
It's definitely a hybrid because it depends on where you're at in your journey, right? If you're at a point where you can start to delegate and you can, hand off things to people that are going to do them as well as or better than you can, then that's a fantastic thing. You see, our mind only has a certain amount of energy per day. And so if we're expelling that energy on things like, I don't know, replying to messages or, sending certain emails or just certain day-to-day tasks that we don't necessarily need to be, then our mind energy can be used better spent on the creative side of things or the next steps or the parts of the business that no one else can do at that point in time. So it's definitely a hybrid, but um, it's learning, okay, when is the right time? And then when that time is right, what are the main things that I can start to give to someone else, but making sure that they can do them as well as I can or better than, because it's only at that point that you're going to, I guess, be able to hand that over, because a lot of entrepreneurs, it's their baby. And so it's a hard thing to give up, I suppose. But yeah, if we have that proof that, okay, this person is going to take care of my baby as well as I can or better than, then that's okay.
Yeah, well, I've encountered that thinking, and it kind of makes sense if it's your project and you want to see it succeed. That, yeah, the ability to let go is probably something that you've come up with quite a bit, and it's about not just the maturity of the business, but it's the maturity in your thinking around where does the business need to go, and as a human being, do you need to spend every waking moment in the business versus um, sort of almost planning to make yourself obsolete in the business so you can work on the next idea. Now that I think that's a challenging state of affairs, because if what you're working on is your passion project and it's all you ever want to work on, then there's some really big pros to that, but the cons will come in that, can you separate yourself from the delivery of what is in the business? And I'm not necessarily thinking here around a product or service, but I'm thinking those in that social entrepreneur space where there's a key issue that you're trying to get addressed or trying to resolve, and it can be all consuming. And I would think that there are many burnt out, very good entrepreneurs around the place that didn't know how to manage that. And you've talked about how you become more mindful, understand what's going on, and then the next bit is give yourself a break when you need to, and that's an issue for anyone in the leadership space. Let alone, this isn't unique, so we're not talking. It's something that hasn't been discussed before. Probably the last area here in that blog post that was of interest to me, and you kind of made the connection, was business growth and scaling. Where's the challenge there?
So this comes into, I guess there's a few different areas here. So business growth and scaling is all about having that forward thinking of, okay, what's next, right? Being really innovative and what's coming. When I sit down with people and they've got their goals, that's awesome. But what's your goal beyond your goal, right? Like once you've achieved that, what comes next? And that's really going to help with that business growth, because a lot of the time we think about, okay, I want to achieve this X. That feels so big and, I've got to get to that. But when we set a goal beyond that, all of a sudden this goal here doesn't seem so massive because we know what's coming next, right? It's telling our mind, hey, that's just a stepping stone to get to where we want to get to next, instead of that's what we want to get to. So when we're talking about scaling and, growing, it's really having that forward thinking of, okay, well, what do those goals look like? And when we set those, we can kind of get a sense of what kind of challenges could arise, what kind of things could come up for us, and starting to create that, confidence or control or clarity around, okay, well, what are we gonna need to get to that part? It's all about really being curious. When we are curious and we go out into the world with that curiosity in our business, we get shown or given some incredible opportunities purely because we don't have this narrow focus. We have this wider focus of, okay, well, what's possible, right? I want to grow. I've kind of got this goal here. I know where I want to get to. What's possible within that instead of being so, I guess, rigid.
Yeah, I fully agree. So look, thank you for your time today. There's one final area I'd like to ask you to draw your mind to, if I can, and that's what would be your top tip based on your experience around developing entrepreneurs? There's probably dozens, but what's the top one that keeps you thinking at night?
Okay, the top one. Oh, okay. It's hard to narrow it down, but I think one of the top ones would have to be getting clear on what your values are and being able to visualize you achieving your goal. Because our mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's not, right? What's real and what's fantasy. So if we can start to visually see us achieving that goal, we're building our confidence and we're building our self-belief that that can happen. And so what happens at that time is, okay, well, that's us achieving that goal and oh, that's us living by those values. And because we're visually seeing that in our mind, we're all of a sudden going to start getting alerted to all the signs and signals around us to get us on that trajectory.
Corinne, thank you for your time, and I'm looking forward to our next chat, which will be around challenges facing entrepreneurs. Thanks for your time, mate.
Thank you so much, Eric.
That concludes the first part of this podcast, which was a focus on developing entrepreneurs. The next part of the discussion is focused on challenges to entrepreneurial development. Thanks again for listening to the first part of the discussion, and we will now hand over to Corinne for our discussion on the challenges facing entrepreneurial development. G'day, Corinne. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for joining me. Today, we are continuing our discussion around entrepreneurs, and we're going to be looking at the challenges that they're facing. So, to start with, and I can't avoid this as a topic area, what would you say were the three key challenges facing entrepreneurs pre the impact of COVID?
Okay, yes. So before COVID, there was a lot of challenges, and I guess it really as what I saw as we stepped into COVID is it highlighted so many areas where businesses were maybe not putting enough focus and attention. And then all of a sudden, and that was around not necessarily innovation, but more adaptability and really being forward thinking. So all of a sudden, when COVID came, all these businesses that were, doing well and plodding along, and these entrepreneurs that were, still doing fantastic things, they had to adapt very quickly and all of a sudden almost like think outside the box. And it had to be a quick and smooth process if they were going to survive all of a sudden, going online, or the changes in what the markets wanted, or the shifts in social media and all of that side of things, because very quickly people had to find new ways of doing things in a very uncertain time. Like, a lot of people didn't know what was going on, didn't know what was going to happen. So I had a lot of experiences where not only were entrepreneurs, clients, dealing with the stress of shifting in business, but they were also dealing with the stress of uncertainty and just, life in general. And, as we know, when, entrepreneurs are very, life and business are very much the same thing a lot of the time. So when you have stress in both sides of it, it becomes all encompassing. So it was learning very quickly how to deal with that, but then also how to pivot the business to handle whatever their challenges were in that landscape.
Thank you for that. One thing that often puzzled me, and it's an area that I've had some thoughts around, is if you look at if there is such a thing as a typical or an average entrepreneur, that these human beings tend to chase risk in a very sort of planned, measured way. And part of chasing that risk, or understanding that it's not necessarily a challenge to building whatever it is that they're building, is this potentially built in element of uncertainty. And I, for the life of me, I thought most entrepreneurs would not have been so challenged by COVID because it was just another obstacle. Now, what you've helped me to do to fill in the blank, so to speak, is that if you've got challenges in your professional life, building the business, engaging with customers, clients, community, and then you've got that superimposed onto your personal life, which was around staying healthy, not spreading COVID, and understanding that you might have family members that were had health exposures to the bug when it hit. That yeah, it would have been a double whammy for entrepreneurs. Not that it wasn't a hit for everyone. So yeah, it's interesting that you said what you said. I wonder though, with the ecosystems that entrepreneurs tend to set up or that are set up by government or some mix of those two, that there would have been a support system there. Was that necessarily true, or did it hit so quickly that those things weren't activated in time? Like from your experience, I know that there might have been other experiences. So what did you see?
Yeah, I saw that there was some levels of support, but a lot of it was uncertainty. And so there are six basic human needs, and two of those are certainty and uncertainty. And we all have that in our life in some way. And so entrepreneurs, like you said before, they love a bit of uncertainty, right? That calculated risk taking, not really knowing where the business is, knowing the goals, but not sure how to get there. Those kind of uncertain things really inspire and motivate a lot of entrepreneurs. But then when you have the other side of it, where there's the uncertainty around what's going on, in the private life, or where their funding is going to come from if they get funding, or if the business takes a dip, how are they going to survive? So that side of the uncertainty is where I saw a lot of people struggle. And yes, there was a little bit of support. Obviously, it's different for everyone, but most of the time, what I saw is or in my client and I guess in my network is people just getting on and being resilient and being okay with there's going to be times where there is a lot of uncertainty right now, but we're going to make it through it.
Again, that's an interesting response. And potentially when you don't have a support network, and I'm trying to compare this to leaders working in a corporate environment or a not-for-profit environment, that there are certain inbuilt support mechanisms. Now, I'm not saying they were perfect across the board. In fact, we learned just how um, hilariously unprepared we all were for what came, and this wasn't there. There shouldn't be, I guess, the degree of negative reflections on how we dealt with the crisis when it came, because some of us were more prepared than others. And so that helps me to segue into the post COVID era. So we're coming out of the worst of it. What do you think? And again, this is from your experiences, obviously, with entrepreneurs. What were some of the lessons that were learned? Because I would hope that something was learned from this, but maybe it wasn't. So what did you see? Or what did you hear?
Yeah, I mean, I saw and heard some beautiful lessons, and I'm someone who very much always looks at the positive of things, and COVID was not a positive time, obviously, and it was a very difficult time for a lot of people. But what's come out of it is the evolution of entrepreneurs, everyone, but in particular, we're talking about entrepreneurs here, has been incredible because not only have they now got this new level of resilience and agility and adaptability, but they're also very flexible and innovative to whatever it is that comes, right? So instead of, and I know we spoke about this yesterday, instead of having that very direct, this is where I'm going side of viewpoint, now they're very much open to, okay, well, things can happen that we could never even fathom. And we have to be ready to adapt and innovate towards that. So that for me, from what I've seen, has been probably the most beautiful thing to come out of it, in terms of what entrepreneurs have sort of moved into. I'm not saying that before that they weren't like that, but it's just almost leveled it up to that next level where it's like, okay, we are really prepared now, because obviously with COVID and all of the stuff that came with that was very out of the blue, and very it was kind of like a slap in the face, like, okay, we need to really, really, really hone in on being resilient, being adaptable, being able to innovate where we need to. Does that answer that?
Yeah, 100%. I think the post-COVID world threw up the degree to which not just individuals but businesses were prepared to pivot when things get rough in the business or when there's an external shock. And I think COVID could be classed as the biggest external human and business shock that we've had, I guess, in living memory. One thing I would ask you is through that process where the entrepreneurs that you have in your network, and again, I don't want you to name any particular individuals, but do you think some of them ignored the lessons of COVID and sort of went back to business as usual?
Um, to an extent, maybe potentially, but in terms of being forced almost to have to change, in terms of, a lot of the world has now gone online. So, just in terms of moving businesses online, like a few people that I know before that weren't really online at all, right? They had that just plain brick and mortar sort of business going on, and now it's really learning, okay, well, say for example the worst happens and something like that happens again, we need to have something in place to mitigate that. And so yes, some people have gone back to it, but the majority of people that I know, they now have that ability to adapt where needed and when needed.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I think from what I'm seeing that it's still a work in progress, and where this gets interesting is modes of work. So we all had to adapt to working differently, and now that people have had a taste of working from home or hybrid working conditions, that kind of sets some workforce challenges, sorry, all of their own going forward, whether you're in the entrepreneurial space or not. Yes, you can have your people attach themselves to a vision and want to achieve the goal, but it's never going to be at the same level as the entrepreneur. And I would suggest possibly leaders in other organizations that the world of work isn't everything to most people now, and it's more, can I get a job that has some brings some satisfaction to me on multiple levels, and do the value propositions align? And we talked about this yesterday, and I had a chance to mull this over much as I do, being a leadership tragic as I am, that yeah, that why doesn't always align, and the why of one part of the business doesn't always gel with the other. So do you think that's taken entrepreneurs by surprise?
Yes, it's interesting. So when I do work with teams, it's yes, you look at so say for example, you have an entrepreneur who has their business and they know their vision, they know their why, their values, everything that's important to them. The way to get your team completely on board is also obviously, like you said, aligning them with that. But you said it perfectly. You can do that, but it doesn't mean that they're going to have the same drive and motivation as you. It's your baby, right? And so it's really having it more of a what would be the word, like collaborative experience. So you really understand, okay, well, what are your team's values and what are their goals within the business? Because if you can really get them to understand their why within the business and also feel like they're a true part of the business, so they have that, whatever area they're in, they can own that within them. So they'll feel like they're almost like a part owner as well. So it's really getting everyone purpose driven. If you can get everyone in the team purpose driven, then it's not, whether it's their baby or not, they're still going to have that drive. It's really just finding the keys to unlock that within them, because there's going to be a reason why they, went for that job within that company, or whatever it is. But you did say it perfectly, and the conversations I have with professionals who work within an organization is, post COVID, how can I have more of a freedom in my lifestyle, right? When I do values with people, one of the top ones all the time is this freedom. And so really understanding that, yes, COVID changed that for a lot of people, but it doesn't mean that they don't want to be passionate and motivated by the work they do. It just means they want a little bit more freedom and flexibility.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to that, and you've covered them quite nicely. But for me, there's always that tension between what does the entrepreneur leader want and need from their teams versus what the teams and individual team members want from the organization. And I still believe that there is still some old thinking out there, and this is a personal view, not a literature driven view, that I'm the entrepreneur. I've risked everything to set up this business. As much as I want people to be aligned, there is still that. I think there's a kernel of, well, I'm giving you an opportunity to work, be grateful for that. Then on the flip side, for those working for the entrepreneur as well, I'm not a robot. I'm not your slave. I get paid a certain amount of money to be here, and I have a massive life outside of the job. You need to be understanding that. And that, I think that tension has always existed. So don't get me wrong. I don't think COVID created a new tension here, but I think it highlighted that on both sides, some truth telling and truth talking is important. And to say that that's done well across the spectrum is just bullshit. It's not done well. And you wouldn't have coaches and mentors and systems out there to help businesses if that stuff was done optimally well. And don't get me wrong, we're human beings, and so we're going to stuff this up as time goes along. So I'm a realist where that space is, but I think there's going to be ample time and resources given to looking back at what happened through COVID and teasing out some of the things that maybe are difficult and hard conversations to have. I don't think at any time it's an easy conversation to talk to people that work for you about the environment in which you've set up. And maybe it's about, well, if you provide the framework for an environment, you invite the people that work for you to help shape that environment. And that takes a lot of guts on both
It
sides because there's a risk there, yeah?
it really does take a lot of guts, and that's, I've seen it done beautifully, and I've seen it done pretty poorly. But two of the main things that I see in that is of importance in businesses is communication and culture. So having a very congruent culture within your team, and then also having that open communication, because if we can communicate how we're feeling as the entrepreneur owner or as the team members and feel that safe space, then there's going to be a lot of clarity there. Where issues come up and where people start to feel hard done by, or whatever it is when there's no clarity in what's going on, or no open communication. So communication and culture are two key things. The other thing is, and I speak about this as a lot, is helping the entrepreneur, helping the owner of the business to dissociate themselves from it, so that it's still their baby, it's still their business, but when we dissociate ourselves, it's all of a sudden we're not so attached to it. So it's not, if our team member isn't doing exactly what we want them to in that specific time, it's not going to be an attack on our own personal baby, right? It's okay, I'm dissociated. This is a business. How do we go about approaching this?
Yeah, I would add something there, and I'd like to get your feedback on this if I could, is do you think it's easier when you're providing a good or service versus providing a social good or service? Do you think that there's more difficulty in separating yourself out? And why I ask this is I think for those of us that create social entrepreneurs, that it really is about you, and that level of disassociation, as you put it, I think would be extremely difficult to do. And the other thing that triggered me to bring this up is when you said, I've seen good ones, and then immediately you went, I've seen some bad ones. I think that's about right. I think there's a mix out there that nobody's doing it quite right. I think the better operators, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, seek feedback on how to do that well, either from external help that you provide or from just going to people you trust in your team. And hopefully you trust your whole team to say, look, we've been through some shit. How do we do this better? And yeah, I think the letting go of some ego and diffusing power within the business, I think, can be difficult for anyone. It doesn't matter whether it's purpose driven or not. So let me ask you a question then. Moving forward here, what do you think is the biggest set of issues facing entrepreneurs in 2024?
So the biggest issues I would say right now are finding people for your team. That is probably one of the biggest ones that I hear about and see, is that it is so hard to find good staff who are motivated and inspired. It's not to say they're not out there, but finding that is getting a lot harder, just because, post COVID, everyone's like, oh, okay, I can have a bit more of a life, outside of work. And so it's really finding the people that are going to align with your business. The other thing is, what I'm finding is a lot more people are becoming aware that they need that extra support, right? Before it was like, I'm a trailblazer, I'm doing this, blah, 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 blah. But now post-COVID, because COVID was an attack on everyone's kind of like mental state in a way, right? Especially people that really were in, big lockdowns. Like, I'm on the coast, we were quite lucky here, but, people in Melbourne and places like that, it was really like difficult down there. And so, the mental strength, I suppose, was kind of impacted there on that very holistic life view. And so now post-COVID, people are understanding the importance of having a very strong mindset, having a very strong support work, having a very strong sense of direction to get through those times where it's a little bit more difficult. And then I suppose as well, just marketing and sales, because so many people have gone online now that I'm not saying the market's like, flooded, but there's a lot of people online. And so it's really becoming, it's really standing out and really understanding your brand or your business at such that deep level that you can really get your message across in a very effective way.
And that segues nicely into our final area, which is tips for entrepreneurs in that space. You've mentioned the challenges, and I think the reverse of, hey, this is how you would deal with it. But yeah, from your perspective, what are those tips that entrepreneurs should be considering to deal with the challenges that they're facing?
There's a few things. Definitely learning to dissociate yourself from the from your business. Again, not saying that it's not still your baby and all of that, but instead of being so attached and in there and every little thing is an attack on you, really learning to dissociate yourself. So I had a beautiful conversation with a girl the other day who's in a social impact business, and she came to me because she is very associated. And when people aren't completely, oh my God, this is an amazing idea, like blah, 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 it's an attack on her. And she needs to really learn how to dissociate herself, so that it doesn't mean that it's not an incredible thing that she's doing by all means. It just means not everyone is going to be, the one that is super excited about it. It doesn't change the fact that what she's doing is incredible. So it's learning to dissociate and almost becoming an observer of the situation. Definitely, as we spoke about yesterday, is having a set routine, because that really gets you in the right mindset. If you can really define what your daily routine looks like, time blocking, waking up in the morning and doing something that centers you, those kind of things really set you up for a good day, month, week. Like, it gets you really set for what's to come, and anything that like comes at you in the day, you can deal with. It builds your resilience. And finally, just being curious to any opportunities, any thoughts, any insights, because those are the things that keep you very innovative and flexible and agile to whatever's going to come. And it also, when you go out in life with a curious mindset, the opportunities that come your way are incredible because you're open to it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, the last point is for me around lifelong learning. So you're gonna learn from being curious, and you might not like everything that you learn or take in, but at least it builds up that grey matter. Corinne, thank you for your time today. This has been great, and thank you for giving us a perspective on the not just developing entrepreneurs, but the challenges that they face in bringing that together quite nicely. I appreciate your time, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. That was awesome.
Thanks everyone for following the podcast. This has been Talking Leadership TV. As always, have a great day, rest of your week, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the podcast. That concludes today's podcast. I'd like to thank you for following today's discussion, but more importantly, I'd like to thank our guest today, Corinne, for sharing her insights around the development and challenges facing our entrepreneurs. So, as always, have a great day, rest of your week, and we'll catch everyone on the next edition of Talking Leadership TV.